Hi, welcome back to another episode of Tuba People TV, where we talk about all things Arnold Jacobs all of the time. I'm here with Puddles in Millennium Park, downtown Chicago, with Dan Cloutier, principal trombone of the Park Symphony Orchestra, and currently professor of trombone at University of Tennessee, Knoxville.
Correct.
Dan and I were in school together at Northwestern. That was many years ago.
Long time now.
Yeah, and Dan's a very special person in my life. Appreciate his testimony very much. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, you had a couple lessons with Mr. Jacobs. I think this is after I left Chicago. Mm-hmm. You were still in town, you and Glenda. And I think, as I recall, you had some scholarship money awarded by Civic.
That's right. Glenda and I were both in summer Civic that year, and they managed to scrape together some scholarship money or stipends, whatever, to get some lessons. And so I hadn't hadn't even taken one lesson with Jake before. So Glenda and I decided, well, what we can do is I'll take one lesson, mm-hmm. and she can listen, and then she'll take the other lesson, and I can listen. And I just remembered that's what happened. So that's, in a way, one pure and one vicarious lesson.
Oh, that was a good idea on your part.
Yeah,
way to go.
Very helpful. So that summer we were doing pictures at an exhibition in Civic. Michael Morgan was conducting. Mm-hmm. It was the Ravel orchestration, and I remember just kind of running out of gas in the Great Gate section, and just wouldn't matter how much I practiced it. Yeah, I could play it softer in my practicing, that sort of thing. I'd get through it all right, but mm-hmm. When the chips were down, I was running out of gas, and I just kind of couldn't make it through it. I mean, I would, but it would just be all pinched and out of tune.
So the sound would get smaller.
Right. I couldn't flow freely on it. So I thought, okay, this is a great problem that I can bring to Mr. Jacobs and find out what he has to say about it. So I show up at the lesson down in the Fine Arts Building, and he said to me, "So, what do you have to play for me?" And I said, "The promenade, or excuse me, the Great Gate." He says, "Oh, go ahead and play." "Well, are you having trouble with it?" And I explained what was going on. Mm-hmm. "Very well." So I start to play, and I get maybe 10, 12 measures through it. And at a rest, he just kind of stops me. He says, "Yes, you're starving your embouchure." And I didn't quite understand what he was talking about. Mm-hmm. I'd read a little bit and hadn't gone to any of his seminars or anything like that yet, so I didn't have a complete. I mean, I knew what he was talking about, but the logistics behind what I was doing to actually starve my embouchure had escaped me. I didn't understand it. So he started to explain how the airstream needs to be the fountain. Mm. And your embouchure is the ball, and the airstream feeds the embouchure, and it flows, and that way your embouchure floats on this breeze. Mm-hmm. And I started thinking, wow, this is really interesting. So we talked a little bit, played a little bit more, and he stopped me after a few measures again, and he kind of poked me on the side. He said, mm-hmm. "I noticed you're trying to breathe from back here. You're trying to expand something back there. He said, why are you doing that?" And I said, I mentioned a particular person from a northeastern major U.S. symphony at the time, suggested that that's how you expand the breathe down. You breathe into your back. And he just kind of raised his eyebrow and gave that little wry half smile that he did. Mm-hmm. And he stood up and he says, "Let me introduce you to the Thin Man," which was his one of his anatomical guys that he had. And he flipped a couple of pages and he started to poke at the guy's lungs. And he says, "Now, as you can see, that particular area that you're trying to fill up there's nothing there to fill up. The lungs stop here and they go up that far. So you're wasting all this extra energy trying to do something that simply doesn't help you at all and actually hurts you." And at that point, the gigantic light bulb is off over my head and my jaw's on the floor, so I pick it back up, and he suggests that I do some breathing exercises and work on filling here and here, expanding the way that we all know that he taught. Mm-hmm. And I understood it, or I should say I had an idea, but I wasn't really doing it because of this crutch or liability that I had created or had been offered. So I did that a little bit, and he says to me, all right, now, play the Ravel again, or the Mussorgsky again, and I play through 12, 16, 18, 20 measures, and nice full volume, nice easy flow.
Mm-hmm.
And then after, at a rest, he motions for me to stop and looks at me with that smile, nods his head, says, very good. Now, let's work on expression. Let's work on music.
Oh, very good, yeah.
And so then we talked a lot about how, especially in the louder volumes, you need to be much more expressive when you play, because otherwise it has results that are not particularly enjoyable. The results that we hear nationwide, but results that just really don't make the piece convincing and enjoyable and something that turns it into a work of art. So we talked a lot about just the louder you play, the more expressive musically you play.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the rest of the lesson, I think I played a couple other excerpts for him as well, the Ride of the Valkyrie, and maybe the Rakotsky March as well. Maybe he mentioned a few things of just make sure your rhythm is steady here, and an articulation issue here and there. But most of it again was about playing musically, expressively, dynamically, not as in loudness, but really bringing your art form through your instrument. And although again I was aware of that, I had so many liabilities in some of the physical aspects of my playing that they weren't coming out the way they should have. So once I understood what I was doing wrong, then it was just up to me to do the work, to create the new habit, and in his words, let the old habit die out from lack of use.
Right.
And it took a while to do, but it has served me well, and I often had a running joke with that lesson was in, 1988 or something like that. My wife and I had this running joke for years. Glenda, who you mentioned before, she'd say, you haven't been tired since 1988.
So that lesson served you well.
Oh, absolutely. And that lesson, and some of the seminars of his that I went to over the years just became the basis for what I'm teaching now. My kids at University of Tennessee, and anybody that stops by here for a lesson, I will often draw that fountain with the ball being suspended, because that for me was the best visual image to hold on to and understand what exactly the air is doing for the embouchure.
Yeah, so more
exactly
rather than a
right, and clamping down, and expanding areas of the body that have nothing to do with the lungs.
Well, that's great, thanks.
Sure.
Dan, I remember we were both arrived in Northwestern the same time, fall of 1981. And so I remember my very first concert, hearing the Chicago Symphony. I'm wondering what your memories are of your very first concert. My first CSO concert, I can't remember exactly when it was. It was, I don't think it was fall quarter, I think it was a little bit later. The second half was Bruckner 6. And the first thing that I noticed right away is that Dale Clevenger was playing without an assistant. So, wow, okay, that's fine. This is CSO, you can do that. Mm-hmm.
Then the first shout chorus, the beginning of the first movement, when suddenly all the brass together, just this wall of sound. And I realized this is the reason I came to study in Chicago, for this, to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
To hear Bud on the top of that, Jake on the bottom of it, and just everybody in the middle, like a huge organ sound.
Yeah.
Solid right from the beginning to the end, and all the little solos that were interspersed throughout the piece. I just remember I was sitting forward the whole time, and like that, just enwrapped.
Yeah.
Just everywhere, watching, paying attention, listening as best I can to every individual, and try to single them out. What do they sound like?
Mm-hmm.
What do they sound like? And Bud there, just the way he would spread out when he played.
Get all red.
Get all red. That's right. Just as the volume increased and all the brass together, just watch him just kind of get redder and redder.
It's his Norwegian complexion. That's what I always say.
Exactly. So that was my first CSO experience.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I think the next one after that was maybe the next year was Bruckner 8. So it was another, it was a big Bruckner thing. Same thing, just older ears on my part after a year of training under my belt, starting to kind of get an idea of how I could do that.
Yeah. Dan, I'm wondering, when you were in Civic in the late 80s, if you ever had a chance to play with CSO.
I did. I remember it was a Sunday, sometime end of June, early July, something like that. And Glenda, my wife, and I had gone to church that morning. We were home making some lunch, and the conversation started to revolve around, well, what are we going to do this afternoon? We got a few hours, do a little practicing, take a walk at the lake, what do we want to do? And the phone rings. And it's Debbie, the personnel manager of the CSO, and she wanted to speak to me. And she said, what are you doing this afternoon? Well, we don't know. I said, nothing. What's up? And we need someone to play this afternoon, or the early evening concert. I think it was the afternoon rehearsal and evening concert. Mm-hmm. So I said, I'm there. And went up and signed the forms and rehearsed Pop's concert with Eric Kunzel was conducting.
Oh wow!
And it was movie music, and the kind of stuff that he loves to do. And Jay was out. I think he was having some oral surgery. I think he had something going on with a tooth or wisdom tooth or something like that. So he was the one that was out. And Jim Gilbertson was playing first, and Frank Crisafulli was playing second, and then I was playing just like a handful of parts for the extra third part. And then Charlie was playing bass. I cannot remember who was playing tuba. It was not
Gene.
It was not Gene.
Okay. Could have been Rex or.
I think it was either Rex or Charlie.
Charlie shook it.
Yeah. I think it was probably Rex. And then Bud and George Vosberg were playing, and Tim Kent, I think, was still playing at that point too. So it was, suddenly there I am in the section of these guys that just I had been emulating for years. Mm-hmm. And the thing that impressed me, and based on the ensembles that I had played in up to that point, at times astounded me, was how it was like just getting on a moving train. The group, the musicians in it, had such a keen awareness of what was going on around them and each other that they create their own momentum. And if you're a sub, all you have to do is just hop on and ride that momentum. You don't have to do anything to make it happen. You certainly don't want to do anything to change its course. And that was just very impressive to me. It's just this is what a top orchestra can do.
And you got to sit next to Mr. Crisafulli.
Crisafulli,
your teacher and undergrad.
Yep, teacher and mentor, which was great fun. And Charlie, I had taken some lessons and studied with him as well. Okay. So it's like right between those guys, this is the place to learn. Yeah. So I just soaked it all up and just listened and copied what I could, but always behaved myself like a good boy.
That's good.
The thing that just really blew me away was Bud. Excuse me. We were doing something from I think it was The Right Stuff or one of those spaceman movies, and the last line of music was just the same rhythm, same chords over and over. It's just bum da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 dum like that. And Bud is up like on a high A or something like that.
Wow!
Just slapping those guys, dum da 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 dum da 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 da. And we got done with that. I just kind of double taked it and thought, how can he do that? And just keep that unbelievably precise triple tongue at that volume, at that tessitura of the instrument. I practiced that, and mine just sounds like
not good. Okay. Or not as good as you want.
Not as good as I want. We'll put it that way. So that was a tremendous encouragement to me to hear that right up close, to see and hear at the same time how it's done. I just run home that night, practice, and just figure out, okay, what was he doing? Keeping everything unbelievably serene here, physically, but the whole time just feeding that air.
Now, you played for a few seasons in the Pittsburgh Symphony.
Yes, I did.
Principal trombone.
Yes, I did.
And so you got to sit next to George Vosberg, and he had, 13, 14 seasons sitting next to Bud Herstaff, and Maybe there's some stories that you got from George about his time in the CSO.
Oh, he would talk about it often. The thing he talked a lot about was the tours and how much fun they had just goofing off on the tours. Well, I remember one particular thing was we'd gone down to see the CSO when we were living here. I think Mahler 5 or something like that. And at one point, Bud dropped his mute. He had played a passage with a mute, and he was reaching forward to put it back on the stand thing, the caddy under the stand, and it didn't make it. It goes, and you can hear it echo through the hall. So Bud did the strangest thing. He reaches down, picks up his mute, and hands it, not looking at him, just hands it to George. And George, takes it, and then obviously somewhere along the line, Bud got it back because he used it later.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mentioned this to someone else, and that night or the next day, and they said, "Oh yeah, if Bud drops his mute, he always does that. Hands it to George." I thought, okay, just the antics of the back row.
Yep, the antics.
So I mentioned this to George when I was playing the PSO about watching him, take Bud's mute all those times, and George just kind of rolls his eyes. Yeah. Well, he stopped doing that at one point. And
really?
I said, really? Why? He says, what? He picked it up and handed it to me one time. I didn't give it back to him. I had to play the rest of the concert without the mute.
So he needed the mute, but he didn't have a mute because
George wouldn't give it back to him. So from then on, Bud never did that again.
George. Oh, that's an interesting story.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I know, I'm sure that at the time it was just like enraging for him to experience that, but I'm sure later they both looked back at it and just laughed about it. It's just, the kind of stuff that it only happens in those situations.
Yeah.
And the kind of stuff you'll take with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's great.
Another George story was that we were on tour in Japan, and there was a reception at Suntory Hall in Tokyo. It was a reception just for the principals, I think, and maybe the associate principals and that sort of thing.
Oh.
So I, borrowed a blazer because I didn't have one, just to go to a party and stuff like that. So we were at a party, and I saw George there, and we were talking. They had amazing food, just all sorts of great Japanese delicacies and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this tray about yay big of beef, really thinly sliced with some onions and stuff like on top of it. I'd never seen that particular beef served that way. And I said, "What's that?" And George says, "It's carpaccio." And I said, "What's that?" And he explained it's like a raw, sliced, thin Kobe beef, but it's raw.
Right.
I had never had it, and so we both tried it, and it was unbelievable. It just melted in your mouth. But no one else in the orchestra would touch it because they knew it was raw beef.
Mm-hmm.
So George and I ate the whole tray.
The whole tray?
Yes.
Well, you wanted to be good guests.
That's right.
That's great. That's funny. And you were okay afterward?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fantastic.
Well, speaking of beef, Puddles, the duck,
Yes.
he has a very special surprise for you.
He does.
Yes, he does. He likes you so much that he wanted to give you this family-size bag of duck food, Genuine University of Oregon duck food, as a way of saying thank you for taking the time to spend with us.
Well, thank you so much.
Today.
I will not eat this all myself. I will share this with my family.
Or George.
Or George. Yeah.
Call him up, see if he wants something.
Okay. I will.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Mike.
It's great seeing you, brother.
Mike,
love it,
man.
All right. Now back to you.